The champagne cork hit our kitchen ceiling at the exact moment I realized my daughter had just poisoned my wife. I'm standing in my own doorway, car keys still in my hand, watching my 64-year-old wife, Joyce, slumped unconscious on our sofa. Her teacup sits full and cold beside her. 40 feet away, my daughter, Victoria, is toasting with my son-in-law, Greg, celebrating what sounds like a real estate deal. 520,000, Victoria laughs, holding up official-looking papers. Mom signed everything this morning. She was so drowsy she barely knew what was happening. I'm Eugene Westbrook. For 35 years, I investigated insurance fraud for a living. I've caught every type of scam artist you can imagine, but I never thought I'd need those skills to investigate my own family. The medical bag sitting next to Joyce's teacup tells me everything I need to know. Victoria's a former nurse. She has access to drugs. She has knowledge about dosages. And apparently she has no problem using both against her own mother. See, I was supposed to be on a plane to Denver right now for my brother's Thanksgiving dinner. Instead, I'm watching my daughter drug my wife so she can steal our house. The house Joyce and I bought with my first promotion check in 1987. The house where Victoria took her first steps and learned to ride a bike. Greg owes money to some very dangerous people. Victoria's been visiting more often lately, always bringing that medical bag, always leaving Joyce feeling tired. And now I know why. They think I'm 30,000 feet in the air. They think they're safe to celebrate stealing everything Joyce and I built together. They think wrong. Because here's what Victoria forgot about her old man. I didn't just investigate insurance fraud. I solved it. Every single case. In this case, this one's personal. What happens next is going to teach my daughter the difference between family loyalty and criminal conspiracy. It's going to show her what 3 decades of putting fraudsters in prison looks like when someone targets the people I love most. And if you think family betrayal is the worst crime here, wait until you hear how I used everything I learned about evidence collection, legal procedures, and cold-blooded justice to make sure Victoria and Greg got exactly what they deserved. This isn't just a story about catching criminals. It's about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you become the people you need protection from. And how sometimes the only way to save your family is to destroy it first. Stick with me, because what I did next is going to change how you think about trust, family, and the difference between forgiveness and justice forever. My name is Eugene Westbrook, and this is how I caught my own daughter trying to kill my wife. Joyce and I built our life in Tampa the honest way. I worked my cases, she ran the library downtown. We raised our daughter Victoria in a house we bought, with my first promotion check in 1987. $520,000 it's worth now, according to the latest assessment. Not bad for 2 people who started with nothing but determination and each other. Victoria became a nurse, married Greg Nash when she was 38. Greg used to practice law until the Florida bar suspended his license 2 years ago. Client fund misappropriation, they called it. Victoria said he was just careless with paperwork. I wanted to believe her. Money got tight for them after Greg lost his license. Their son Tyler needed college funds. Victoria started working double shifts. But it wasn't enough. They'd borrowed from us 3 times in the past year. $15,000 in January, $8,000 in June, another $12,000 in September. We never asked for it back. Family is family. But this week, everything started to feel wrong. Victoria began visiting more often, always carrying her old nursing bag. I want to monitor Mom's blood pressure, she'd say. She's getting to that age. Joyce would feel drowsy after these visits, sleeping through her favorite evening shows. I chalked it up to retirement fatigue. I was wrong. Tuesday evening, I overheard Victoria on our back porch, voice low into her phone. The asset liquidation should be smooth. She trusts me completely. Asset liquidation. That's not how daughters talk about caring for their mothers. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Wednesday morning, Greg showed unusual interest in our house's value. This place could really be something special with the right buyer, he said, walking through our living room like an appraiser. Market's hot right now. People are getting amazing prices. He'd never cared about real estate before. Now he was speaking like he'd done research. Thursday, I found real estate brochures hidden under Victoria's purse. Glossy photos of houses in expensive neighborhoods. Price ranges that matched what ours would sell for. When I asked Joyce if she'd signed any papers lately, she looked confused. "I don't think so," she said. "Maybe? I can't quite remember." My wife has a memory like a steel trap. She doesn't forget signatures. That's when I decided to investigate this like any other case. Because 35 years of chasing fraudsters taught me one thing. When family starts acting like criminals, you treat them like criminals. I started with the basics: evidence collection, chain of custody, documentation. Skills that sent dozens of insurance scammers to prison were about to get their first domestic application. I tested Joyce's tea Wednesday evening after Victoria left. Rohypnol traces, date rape drug, professional grade sedative that leaves minimal memory traces. Victoria's nursing background gave her access and knowledge. My daughter was drugging my wife. The lab confirmation arrived by email at 2:47 a.m. Thursday morning. Official. Undeniable. Heartbreaking. Next, I analyzed the papers Joyce couldn't remember signing. Power of attorney documents. Handwriting analysis showed clear inconsistencies with Joyce's normal signature. The notary stamp belonged to someone Victoria knew from her hospital days. Another fraud link in an expanding chain of betrayal. I installed hidden cameras in 3 locations Tuesday night, while Victoria thought I was at my Thursday golf game. Audio recording devices in the kitchen, living room, and my home office. All legally placed in my own property. Evidence admissible in any Florida court. 35 years of insurance investigations taught me how to build cases that stick. The recordings revealed everything. Greg owed $180,000 to various creditors. Gambling debts primarily, with some business loans gone bad. They'd planned this for months. Sedate Joyce gradually. Establish a pattern of confusion. File for emergency guardianship. Then sell the house as necessary medical care. Classic elder abuse with a medical twist. Their timeline was accelerated. Complete the sale before Christmas, use the money to satisfy Greg's debts, and fund their relocation to a state with better asset protection laws. They'd researched Nevada and Delaware specifically. Sophisticated planning that proved premeditation. But they made one crucial mistake. They forgot I spent my career catching people who thought they were smarter than the system. Friday morning, I implemented my response plan. First, I contacted Dr. Benjamin Torres, our family physician for 15 years. Toxicology report in hand, I explained the situation. Ben was horrified. He agreed to formally document Joyce's condition and testify if needed. Medical professionals take a dim view of colleagues who abuse their knowledge. Second, I called Patricia Coleman, our state attorney since 2008. Patricia's practice specialized in elder law and estate protection. She'd seen every variation of family financial abuse. "Jean," she said after reviewing my evidence, "this is criminal elder abuse under Florida Statute 825.102. We need to act fast and document everything." Third, I activated my surveillance operation. 5 days of 24/7 monitoring. Hidden cameras captured every visit, every conversation, every attempt to manipulate Joyce. Audio recording documented their entire scheme, including specific mention of forging additional documents and accelerating the timeline due to the old man getting suspicious. The evidence was overwhelming, but evidence alone doesn't deliver justice. Timing does. I learned their final move was scheduled for today, Thanksgiving morning. Joyce was supposed to sign the actual sale contract while confused from increased sedation. The buyers were already arranged, a cash offer that would close within 48 hours. Victoria and Greg would have Thanksgiving dinner, celebrating their success while Joyce slept off the drugs. Instead, they were about to learn what happens when you steal from someone who spent 35 years putting thieves in prison. This morning, I executed my counterstrike. While Victoria and Greg thought I was flying to Denver for my brother's Thanksgiving, I was actually coordinating with law enforcement from my hotel room 4 blocks away. Sometimes the best surveillance position is the one your targets think is empty. At 10:15 a.m., Victoria arrived with her medical bag. At 10:32 a.m., Joyce drank the tea Victoria prepared. At 10:48 a.m., Greg arrived with the sale contract and a notary Victoria had bribed to backdate documents. At 11:05 a.m., Joyce's signature was forged on papers selling our house for $520,000. At 11:06 a.m., Tampa Police, Adult Protective Services, and Patricia Coleman walked through our front door. "Mr. and Mrs. Nash," Officer Rodriguez announced, "you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit grand theft." Victoria dropped the pen. Greg's face went white. Joyce, still drowsy from the sedation, looked confused but safe in Patricia's protective custody. The look on Victoria's face when she realized I'd been recording everything for 5 days will stay with me forever. The same daughter who used to run to me when she skinned her knees, now handcuffed for drugging her own mother. Greg tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. Audio recordings, video surveillance, toxicology reports, handwriting analysis, financial records showing their debts and timeline. They'd planned this meticulously, but I'd investigated it better. The legal consequences unfolded swiftly. Florida takes elder abuse seriously, especially cases involving medical knowledge to commit crimes. Victoria's nursing license was suspended pending criminal investigation. Greg faced additional charges for practicing law while suspended, since he'd drafted the fraudulent documents. Their son, Tyler, innocent in all this, went to stay with Greg's parents in Georgia. The financial investigation revealed the full scope of their desperation. Greg hadn't just borrowed money for gambling. He'd taken a second mortgage on their house without telling Victoria, using forged income documents. They were 3 months from foreclosure. Our house was their last chance salvation, and they were willing to destroy their family to get it. But here's what broke my heart most. Victoria had been drugging Joyce for 6 weeks, not the few days I'd discovered. 6 weeks of slowly poisoning her own mother, watching her get confused and weak, all while pretending to provide loving care. The medical records Dr. Torres pulled showed Joyce's unexplained fatigue and memory issues started exactly when Victoria began her health monitoring visits. My daughter had been killing my wife by inches, and I'd been grateful for her attention. The court case moved quickly, with overwhelming evidence and Victoria's nursing background making the crime especially egregious. Plea bargaining was their only option. Victoria received 18 months in prison, plus 5 years probation with mandatory psychological counseling. Greg got 36 months for multiple fraud charges, plus lifetime prohibition from practicing law in any state. They forfeited all parental rights to any inheritance from Joyce and me. The house stayed ours. Joyce recovered fully once the sedation stopped, though the betrayal left deeper scars than the drugs. We installed new security systems and changed all our locks and passwords. Patricia helped us establish a trust that protects our assets from any future family manipulation. Legal walls that can't be climbed over or drugged away. But justice isn't just about punishment. It's about boundaries and consequences, and teaching people that love doesn't mean tolerance for abuse. Victoria writes letters from prison. Joyce reads them sometimes, though she hasn't responded. The letters are full of apologies and explanations about desperation and Greg's influence. Classic manipulation language I've heard from dozens of fraudsters trying to minimize their crimes after getting caught. I never meant to hurt anyone. I was just trying to solve our problems. I thought you'd never find out, so no real harm would be done. But the harm was done. Trust, once broken by poisoning your own mother, doesn't heal with explanations. Greg's letters are different, angry, blaming me for destroying the family, claiming I set them up and went too far in my investigation. He still doesn't understand that the crime was the setup. I just documented it. 35 years of catching insurance fraudsters taught me the difference between creating crimes and exposing them. Some people think I was too harsh. They're family, neighbors say. Maybe counseling would have been better than prison. But these same people have never watched someone slowly poison their spouse while pretending to provide loving care. They've never seen the medical effects of sustained sedation on a 64-year-old woman. They've never had their daughter look them in the eye while planning to steal everything they've worked for. Family isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. Love isn't permission to commit crimes. Trust isn't an unlimited resource that refills itself after betrayal. Those are boundaries. And boundaries, once crossed, come with consequences. Joyce and I are rebuilding our life together. We've started new traditions, traveled to places we'd always planned to visit someday. We volunteer at the Elder Advocacy Center downtown, helping other families recognize the warning signs of financial abuse. Turns out, our story isn't unique. Adult children stealing from aging parents is more common than most people want to believe. The hardest part isn't the betrayal. It's the realization that the daughter I raised, the one I taught right from wrong, became someone who could drug her own mother for money. That's a failure I'll carry forever, even though Patricia and Dr. Torres both insist it's not my fault. Good parents can raise bad children. Love can create entitlement as easily as gratitude. But here's what I've learned. Protecting the innocent matters more than preserving family harmony. Joyce deserved safety more than Victoria deserved unconditional forgiveness. Justice sometimes looks like love, even when love looks like betrayal. Victoria will be released in 14 months with time served. The conditions of her probation include mandatory counseling, supervised visitation only, and permanent prohibition from any medical or caretaking roles with Joyce. She'll have opportunities to rebuild her life, but not to endanger ours. Conditional redemption, not unlimited absolution. Greg won't be welcome in our home again. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. Tyler, their son, visits us sometimes. He's angry at both his parents for putting greed above family, but he's channeling that anger into his studies. Pre-med at University of Florida, planning to become the kind of doctor who protects patients instead of exploiting them. Sometimes good emerges from the wreckage of bad choices. The house is quiet now, peaceful in ways it hadn't been during those weeks when I was unknowingly living with people who were planning to rob us. Security cameras still run, but they record normal life. Morning coffee, evening news, Sunday crosswords. Evidence of contentment instead of conspiracy. Joyce's health is completely restored. Her memory is sharp again. Her energy returned. She's writing a book about recognizing elder abuse, working with the Advocacy Center to help other families, turning our trauma into tools for protecting others. I still have my investigator's instincts. I notice when people's stories don't match their actions. I pay attention to who benefits from confusion and who thrives on trust. 35 years of catching fraudsters wasn't just a career. It was training for life. But I'm also learning to trust again. Carefully. With boundaries. With verification. Not the blind faith that made us vulnerable, but the informed confidence that comes from knowing how to spot deception and having legal protections in place. Thanksgiving has new meaning now. Not just gratitude for what we have, but appreciation for what we've protected. Not just family togetherness, but family integrity. The difference between love and exploitation, between caring and control. Some families survive betrayal by pretending it never happened. Others survive by making sure it never happens again. We chose the second path. It's lonelier, but safer. More honest, but harder. Victoria may earn forgiveness someday, but that's different from earning back trust. Forgiveness is an emotional gift we might give ourselves for healing. Trust is a practical tool that requires evidence of change over time. Sustainable change, not just prison time remorse. Greg won't get either. Some people reveal themselves completely when they're desperate, and what he revealed was ugly all the way through. Better to know the truth than live with dangerous illusions. The money we would have left Victoria and Greg is going into a scholarship fund for nursing students who commit to elder care ethics training. Positive legacy from a negative situation. Making sure future medical professionals understand that knowledge is power and power must be used to protect, not exploit. Our will now contains specific language about mental competency evaluations, multiple witness requirements for changes, and automatic legal review of any unusual financial activity, legal boundaries that protect us, and any future inheritance from manipulation. Patricia drafted ironclad protections based on exactly the schemes Victoria and Greg attempted. The house that Victoria tried to steal will stay in our family, but through carefully structured legal channels that prevent future abuse. Tyler will inherit it eventually, with conditions that ensure it serves as a home, not just an asset. Earned inheritance, not assumed entitlement. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about protection, making sure the innocent stay safe, and the guilty face consequences that prevent future harm. Building systems stronger than the people who might try to break them. I spent 35 years catching criminals who stole from strangers. The hardest case of my career was catching criminals who stole from family. But the skills were the same: evidence, documentation, legal procedure, and the patience to let guilty people convict themselves through their own actions. Victoria and Greg thought they were stealing our house. Really, they were teaching us about the difference between family and trust, between unconditional love and unlimited tolerance, between forgiveness and foolishness. Those are lessons worth learning, even when they cost everything you thought you knew about the people you raised. The champagne Victoria bought to celebrate selling our house is still in our refrigerator, waiting for a real celebration. Like the day she proves she's learned the difference between desperation and crime, between financial problems and moral solutions. I'm not holding my breath. But I'm not closing the door completely either. Justice always leaves room for redemption. It just doesn't make redemption easy or unconditional or guaranteed. That's what boundaries look like. That's what consequences teach. That's what love becomes when it grows up and learns to protect itself. The case is closed, but the lessons remain open. Victoria has 14 months to prove she learned them. Joyce and I have the rest of our lives to remember them. Some Thanksgivings are about gratitude. This one was about truth. Both matter, but truth protects you when gratitude makes you vulnerable. That's the difference between wisdom and wishful thinking. That's why the house is still ours, and the people who tried to steal it are learning that family doesn't mean immunity. November 3rd started like any other Tuesday morning in our comfortable Portland home on Elm Street. Grace sat at our oak kitchen table, organizing her weekly pill dispenser with the methodical precision that had kept her type 2 diabetes under control for 8 straight years. Every morning at 7:15 a.m. sharp, every evening at 6:30 p.m. without fail. The routine never varied by even 5 minutes. Grace treated her medication schedule like a sacred contract with life itself, and in 8 years, she'd never missed a single dose. Our kitchen had become her medication command center. Insulin pens lined up in order of expiration dates, glucose test strips organized by batch numbers. The digital meter that tracked her blood sugar readings placed exactly 3 inches to the right of her coffee mug. Everything had its place, and Grace knew that place by heart. "Ray, have you seen my glucose meter?" she called from the kitchen, her voice carrying a note of confusion that I'd been noticing with increasing frequency over the past week. I could have sworn I left it right here next to my insulin pens, like always. I found the glucose meter in our bathroom medicine cabinet, nestled behind my blood pressure medication and Grace's backup insulin supplies. The placement struck me as completely wrong. In 8 years of meticulous diabetes management, Grace had never stored her monitoring equipment anywhere except the kitchen counter, where she conducted her twice-daily readings. "That's strange," Grace said when I brought it to her. "I don't remember putting it there. Maybe I was distracted last night after my evening dose." But Grace was never distracted during medication time. It was the most focused part of her day, approached with the concentration of a surgeon preparing for a critical operation. She'd check the insulin pen label twice, verify the dose amount, clean the injection site, and record everything in her logbook with precise handwriting. "Must have put it there last night," Grace said when I brought it to her. But her expression showed the same confusion I'd been seeing more often lately. Small moments of disorientation, brief gaps in memory. Nothing dramatic enough to warrant concern, but consistent enough to create a pattern. That afternoon, our daughter Vicky arrived with her husband Nathan for what had become their weekly visit since Nathan's restaurant failed 6 months earlier. Nothing unusual about family stopping by, except Nathan's increasingly pointed questions about our estate planning. Dad, you and Mom really should update your legal documents, Nathan said, settling into our living room chair like he belonged there. Property values in Portland have skyrocketed. Your house is probably worth twice what you paid. You want to make sure everything's properly structured for tax purposes. Nathan Brooks, 44 years old, divorce attorney with a struggling practice and opinions about everyone else's financial decisions. He spoke in legal terminology the way some people breathe, automatically without considering how it affected the people listening. We updated everything 2 years ago, I replied. Our lawyer handles all that. But Nathan persisted. Have you considered establishing a trust? Transferring property ownership to avoid probate complications? There are significant advantages to planning ahead instead of waiting for crisis situations. The way he said crisis situations made my investigator instincts twitch. In 35 years of insurance fraud cases, I'd learned to recognize when someone was fishing for specific information. Nathan wasn't asking about estate planning for our benefit. He was conducting reconnaissance. Vicky seemed distracted during that visit, checking her phone constantly and exchanging meaningful glances with Nathan when they thought Grace and I weren't watching. Our daughter had always been expressive, inheriting my attention to detail and Grace's emotional transparency. But that Tuesday, she seemed to be suppressing something important. Mom, you've been looking tired lately, Vicky said, watching Grace struggle to remember whether she'd taken her afternoon medication. Maybe I should help organize your pills, just to make sure you don't accidentally double dose or miss something important. Grace smiled with the patient warmth she'd shown our daughter for 41 years. Honey, I've been managing these medications longer than you've been married to Nathan. I think I can handle a few pills. I know, Mom. I just worry about you. Living alone out here with Dad, traveling for consulting work. What if something happened and nobody was around to help? The concern sounded genuine, the kind of loving worry adult children naturally develop about aging parents. But something in Vicky's tone felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced this conversation beforehand. That evening, after they left, Grace experienced what became the first of many episodes that would define the next 3 weeks. She forgot where she'd put her car keys, hanging on the hook by the front door, where they'd hung for 15 years. She asked me twice whether I'd locked the back door. She couldn't remember what medication she'd taken after dinner. Ray, I feel foggy tonight, she said as we prepared for bed. Like my brain's wrapped in cotton. Maybe I should call Dr. Williams tomorrow. But by morning, Grace felt fine. Alert, oriented, completely herself. The confusion had passed like weather, leaving no trace except my growing concern about what might be causing these intermittent cognitive lapses. November 10th brought more pronounced symptoms. Grace woke up disoriented, unable to remember what day it was or whether she'd taken her morning insulin. I found her in the kitchen, staring at her pill organizer like she'd never seen it before. I can't remember if I took my medication, she said, holding her glucose meter with shaking hands. The numbers don't look right, but I can't remember what I'm supposed to do. Her blood sugar reading showed 65 milligauge DL, dangerously low for someone who should have been fasting before breakfast. Low enough to cause exactly the kind of confusion and disorientation she'd been experiencing. I called Dr. Williams immediately and scheduled an emergency appointment. While Grace rested, I started doing what 35 years of insurance investigation had trained me to do. Document everything. Times, symptoms, medication schedules, blood sugar readings, anything that might reveal a pattern. Her readings are inconsistent, Dr. Williams said after examining Grace's glucose logs. Some days perfectly normal, others showing dangerous fluctuations. Are you certain she's taking her insulin correctly? Not skipping doses or accidentally double dosing? Grace has never missed a medication dose in 8 years, I replied. She's more reliable than a Swiss watch. Then we need to consider other factors. Stress can affect blood sugar, changes in diet, exercise, sleep patterns. Has anything unusual happened recently? I mentioned Vicky and Nathan's increased visits. Grace's intermittent confusion episodes, the questions about our estate planning. Dr. Williams listened with the careful attention doctors reserve for situations that don't quite add up. Ray, I want you to start monitoring Grace's insulin more closely. Count the units in her pens. Track exactly when she takes each dose. If someone else is handling her medication, even with good intentions, mistakes can happen. That afternoon, I started treating my wife's medical care like a fraud investigation. Because something about this pattern felt deliberate, too convenient, too perfectly timed with Nathan's legal questions and Vicky's offers to help with medication management. Professional instinct told me to trust the evidence instead of my emotions. And the evidence was pointing toward a conclusion no father wants to consider. I called Emma Sullivan, our neighbor who'd worked as a pharmacist for 25 years before retiring. Emma lived 2 houses down and had maintained friendly relationships with most families on our street. More importantly, she understood medications in ways most people didn't. Ray, I don't want to alarm you, Emma said when I described Grace's symptoms over coffee in her kitchen. But what you're describing sounds like insulin manipulation. Too much insulin causes exactly those cognitive effects: confusion, disorientation, memory problems, and the timing you mentioned, episodes happening after family visits, that's concerning. You think someone's deliberately giving Grace extra insulin? I think you need to consider that possibility, especially if someone with medical training has been offering to help with her medications. Emma's words hit me like physical blows. Vicky had worked as a registered nurse for 6 years before marrying Nathan. She understood insulin dosing, blood sugar management, and exactly what too much medication could do to someone Grace's age. Ray, if I'm right about this, Grace is in serious danger. Insulin overdoses can cause comas, permanent brain damage, even death. And if someone's doing this gradually, building up tolerance while increasing doses, it could be designed to look like natural health decline. That evening, I made the hardest decision of my marriage. I started secretly monitoring Grace's medication without telling her what I suspected. Because if my own daughter was slowly poisoning her mother, Grace's innocent trust could be the thing that killed her. November 15th brought the discovery that confirmed my worst fears. While Grace napped in the living room, I checked her insulin pen supplies. According to her prescription schedule and Dr. Williams's dosing instructions, she should have had enough insulin for another 10 days. Instead, her supply showed only 3 days remaining. Someone was using Grace's insulin faster than her prescribed dosage. Either she was taking massive overdoses, which her careful nature made impossible, or someone else was administering extra doses without her knowledge. I drove to Eastside Pharmacy, where we'd filled prescriptions for 15 years. The staff knew us by name and had always been helpful with insurance questions and medication coordination. Today, I needed them to help me solve a potential murder attempt. Mr. Patterson, I can pull Grace's prescription history, said Janet, the head pharmacist who'd handled our account for over a decade. But I should tell you, we've been concerned about her insulin refills lately. Concerned how? She's been refilling prescriptions early, sometimes 2 weeks ahead of schedule. And the person picking up medications isn't always Grace. Last week, someone claiming to be her daughter picked up a 30-day supply when Grace still had 2 weeks of medication remaining. Janet pulled up the records on her computer screen. 4 early refills in the past 2 months, each one picked up by family member for elderly patient. Each one approved because the person requesting pickup demonstrated detailed knowledge of Grace's medical condition and medication schedule. Do you have security footage of who's been picking up these prescriptions? We keep recordings for 30 days. Let me check last Tuesday's footage. The security video showed Vicky at the pharmacy counter, handling Grace's prescription pickup with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this multiple times. She presented Grace's insurance card, answered questions about dosage and timing, and left with enough insulin to last a month. Insulin Grace didn't need because she still had adequate supplies at home. Vicky was stockpiling Grace's medication, building up reserves for a purpose I was only beginning to understand. That night, I confronted the truth I'd been avoiding for weeks. My daughter was systematically drugging my wife. But this wasn't random cruelty or mental illness. This was methodical, calculated, purposeful, which meant there was an end game I hadn't discovered yet. The answer came when I found the real estate documents hidden in Vicky's car. November 18th, while Grace visited her sister Helen for their weekly lunch, I searched Vicky's Honda Civic parked in our driveway. What I found in her glove compartment changed everything I thought I knew about our family's financial situation. Professional real estate photographs of our house, interior shots of every room, exterior angles highlighting our mature landscaping and updated kitchen, marketing materials describing charming Portland craftsmen, move-in ready, perfect for young families or investors. Our home, the house I'd bought for $85,000 in 1998 and had professionally appraised at $420,000 last spring, was already photographed and prepared for immediate sale. But the real shock was the paperwork underneath the photos. A power of attorney document, supposedly signed by Grace, dated November 1st, exactly when her confusion episodes had started. The signature looked authentic, but I knew Grace hadn't signed any legal documents recently. She would have discussed something that important with me. Nathan's legal expertise finally made sense. He knew exactly which documents they needed to gain control of our assets. Power of attorney would give them authority to make financial decisions on Grace's behalf, including selling our house without my consent if they could prove Grace was mentally incompetent. The insulin manipulation wasn't random abuse. It was part of a carefully planned scheme to create documented cognitive impairment that would justify legal guardianship. They were systematically destroying Grace's mental clarity to steal everything we owned. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed an old man wouldn't notice the details. They'd forgotten that I'd spent 35 years investigating insurance fraud, building cases against people who thought they were smarter than the system. More importantly, they'd forgotten that I was Grace's husband, the one person who'd notice every change in her routine, every shift in her behavior, every sign that something wasn't right in our home. That realization led me to make the phone call that would define everything that came next. Not to the police, not yet. Evidence of elder abuse required more documentation than suspicion and circumstantial proof. But to Judge Morrison, who'd worked insurance fraud cases with me for over a decade before his retirement. "Ray," Judge Morrison said after I explained the situation, "you're describing a sophisticated elder abuse scheme. The insulin manipulation creates cognitive impairment. The forged power of attorney provides legal authority. Once they control Grace's decision-making capacity, they can liquidate assets and claim they're acting in her best interests. What about Grace's immediate safety? Can you monitor her medications without alerting them to your suspicions? Document everything, but don't let on that you're investigating. In court, we'll need medical evidence, financial proof, and documentation of their intent. Let them think their plan is working while you build a case that will put them in prison." Every fatherly instinct told me to confront Vicky immediately, to demand explanations and threaten consequences. But Judge Morrison was right. Accusations without evidence mean nothing in court, and if Vicky and Nathan realized I was investigating, they might accelerate their timeline in ways that could kill Grace. The next 72 hours became the most methodical investigation of my career, applying every technique I'd learned in 35 years of insurance fraud cases to protect my own wife from my own daughter. First, I installed discrete security cameras throughout our house, positioning each one within our own property boundaries to ensure legal admissibility. The kitchen camera focused on Grace's medication storage area, capturing anyone who approached her insulin supplies. The living room camera covered her afternoon rest area, documenting symptoms and timing of her confusion episodes. The front entrance camera recorded everyone who came and went, with timestamps that would correlate with Grace's medical symptoms. Every camera was wireless, battery-powered, and connected to cloud storage that created automatic backups every hour. I'd learned from insurance cases that disappeared when suspects destroyed local recordings. This evidence would survive even if they discovered and destroyed the cameras themselves. I also established a secure evidence protocol. Digital files stored in 3 separate locations. Physical documents copied and stored in a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Witness statements recorded and notarized. Chain of custody forms for every piece of evidence. In court, defense attorneys love to attack sloppy evidence handling. This case wouldn't give them that opportunity. Meanwhile, I contacted my former colleagues at Meridian Insurance through secure channels. Insurance investigation creates professional networks that extend across state lines and survive retirement. Within 48 hours, I had Nathan's complete financial profile from sources he'd never know existed. The financial investigation revealed debt levels that explained everything. Student loans from Vicky's nursing degree, $89,000 at 7.2% interest, payments 3 months behind. Credit card debt from Nathan's failed restaurant, $67,000 across 8 cards, minimum payments consuming 40% of his current income. Private loans from non-traditional lenders, $45,000 borrowed at 18% annual interest with personal collateral requirements. But the most damning evidence came from Nathan's legal practice records, accessed through legitimate professional channels that defense attorneys couldn't challenge. 3 elderly clients had filed formal complaints with the Oregon State Bar about missing money over the past 18 months. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, 79, missing $23,000 from her estate account. Mr. George Hendricks, 82, missing $15,000 from his trust fund. Mrs. Agnes Murphy, 77, missing $31,000 from her insurance settlement. All 3 cases had been settled out of court with confidentiality agreements. All 3 involved estates Nathan had managed as attorney of record. All 3 clients showed signs of cognitive impairment that made their testimony unreliable in court proceedings. The pattern was unmistakable. Nathan had been practicing on other families before targeting ours, refining his techniques, learning which approaches worked and which attracted unwanted attention from family members or medical professionals. November 20th brought the recorded conversation that would provide the final piece of evidence needed for criminal prosecution. I'd left my iPhone recording in voice memo mode while running an emergency errand to purchase replacement parts for our furnace. A legitimate reason to leave the house quickly, giving them privacy to discuss whatever needed immediate attention. When I returned 52 minutes later, Grace was unconscious on our living room couch, her 4th unexplained blackout that week, and Vicky was in our kitchen talking to Nathan. Their conversation, captured in high-definition audio that would be admissible in court, provided evidence of intent that no defense attorney could explain away. Mom's insulin overdose should keep her unconscious for at least 2 more hours. Vicky's voice came through clearly. I administered 40 units instead of her normal 15. That's enough to create serious hypoglycemia without causing permanent brain damage, as long as we don't let it go too long. Nathan's reply was equally damning. Perfect timing. Your father's been gone almost an hour, and he said the furnace repair would take most of the afternoon. That gives us enough time to get her signature on all the power of attorney documents while she's disoriented enough to sign anything we put in front of her. What if she remembers signing them later? What if Dad asks questions about documents she doesn't recall authorizing? The beauty of insulin manipulation is that it creates legitimate cognitive impairment. If this goes to court, any medical expert will testify that diabetic episodes cause memory problems. Her confusion will be medically documented, which makes the power of attorney completely defensible. And if the house sale goes through before Dad realizes what's happening, then we're looking at $420,000 in immediate cash, minus realtor fees and closing costs. Should clear $380,000 minimum. That pays off all our debts with enough left over to disappear if your father tries to challenge anything legally. What about the life insurance policy? You mentioned that might be simpler than dealing with property transfers. Nathan's response made my blood freeze. The life insurance policy has a double indemnity clause for accidental death. $500,000 payout if your mother dies from medical complications rather than natural causes. Insulin overdose would qualify as accidental if we time it right. How would we make that look accidental? Simple. Your father travels for consulting work twice a month. Next time he's gone overnight, your mother has a severe diabetic emergency. Paramedics find her unconscious, insulin pen nearby, signs of accidental overdose. Tragic mistake by confused elderly woman. No investigation, no questions, just sympathy and insurance payments. They weren't just planning to steal our house. They were planning to murder Grace and make it look like a medical accident. My daughter was discussing killing her mother with the same casual tone she'd used to plan a grocery list. I stood in my own driveway, listening to my child plan matricide for financial gain, and realized that 35 years of investigating insurance fraud had been preparation for this moment. The biggest case of my career was happening in my own kitchen, and the defendants were family members I'd loved and trusted without question. That night, I made copies of everything: medical records showing Grace's irregular insulin levels and cognitive symptoms, pharmacy records documenting unauthorized prescription pickups and medication stockpiling, financial documents revealing Nathan's massive debts and history of elder abuse, security footage capturing their conversations and criminal planning. But most importantly, I made a decision that would define everything that followed. I was going to let them proceed with their Thanksgiving plan. Not because I wanted Grace in additional danger. I'd already contacted Dr. Williams and arranged for discreet medical monitoring to ensure her safety. November 21st through November 26th became an elaborate performance where I pretended to be an oblivious old man while documenting every aspect of their criminal conspiracy. Grace's health stabilized somewhat because Dr. Williams had secretly adjusted her actual insulin supplies to counteract their tampering, though we couldn't eliminate their access completely without alerting them to our suspicions. Vicky and Nathan increased their visits, always bringing helpful suggestions about Grace's care and pointed questions about our estate planning. They pushed harder for power of attorney authorization, claiming it was just a precaution in case Grace's confusion episodes worsened. "Dad, we're just trying to help," Vicky said during one particularly aggressive conversation. "If something happened to Mom, if she became unable to make decisions, wouldn't you want family handling things instead of strangers?" "Grace is fine," I replied. "Her doctor says the confusion episodes are probably just medication adjustment issues." "But what if they're not? What if this is early dementia? Wouldn't it be better to plan ahead while she can still participate in important decisions?" The manipulation was masterful. They were using my love for Grace against me, suggesting that protecting her required surrendering legal authority to them. If I hadn't known about their real plans, their arguments might have seemed reasonable. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the sick irony that only real life provides. Vicky and Nathan came over early to help with preparations, bringing their own contributions to what they believed would be their final family meal in our house. Grace seemed better that morning. Dr. Williams's countermeasures were working, but she remained weak from weeks of systematic poisoning. She moved carefully, spoke softly, and required help with tasks she'd managed independently for decades. "Mom, you look tired," Vicky said, with concern that would have seemed genuine if I hadn't heard her planning Grace's murder. "Maybe you should rest while Nathan and I handle the dinner preparations." "Actually," I replied, "I think Grace should stay involved. Thanksgiving is about family time. She'll have plenty of opportunity to rest after dinner." Nathan shot me a look I'd never seen before. Impatient, frustrated, aggressive. The expression of a man whose carefully planned timeline was being disrupted by an uncooperative old fool. "Ray, we really need to discuss some legal matters today," Nathan said, pulling a manila folder from his briefcase. "While we're all together as a family, some paperwork that needs Grace's signature." "What kind of paperwork?" "Just updating some documents. Power of attorney forms, medical directives, making sure everything's properly handled in case you and Grace ever need assistance managing your affairs." The audacity was breathtaking. Nathan was explaining how he planned to steal from us while carving the turkey Grace had spent all morning preparing despite her weakness from their systematic poisoning. Dinner conversation felt surreal. Vicky talked about being thankful for family while monitoring Grace's confusion levels and energy. Nathan discussed future planning and financial security while mentally calculating how much our house would bring on the current market. Grace, still affected by weeks of insulin manipulation, but trying to participate in what she believed was a normal family gathering, shared memories of previous Thanksgivings and expressed gratitude for having everyone together. "I'm so blessed to have a daughter who cares about our well-being," Grace said, reaching across the table to squeeze Vicky's hand. "And a son-in-law who understands legal matters. You both work so hard to make sure your father and I are protected." Vicky smiled and squeezed back, playing the devoted daughter role while her mother thanked her for planning her murder. That's when I decided the performance had gone on long enough. "Nathan," I said, as he pushed yet another set of legal documents toward Grace, "before we sign anything important, I need to show you something that might change your perspective on our family's legal situation. I pulled out my phone and navigated to the voice memo from November 20th. Their own words began filling our dining room. Mom's insulin overdose should keep her unconscious for at least 2 more hours. I administered 40 units instead of her normal 50-odd. The silence that followed was profound. The kind of quiet that comes when reality shifts permanently. When masks fall away, when families discover they never really knew each other at all. Vicky's face drained of all color, her hand freezing halfway to her wine glass. Nathan's confident attorney demeanor collapsed like a house of cards. Grace looked confused, not from medication this time, but from hearing words that made no logical sense in the context of family love. I've been conducting a full investigation for 3 weeks, I continued, my voice steady despite watching my family disintegrate in real time. Medical evidence of systematic insulin tampering confirmed by Dr. Williams through blood tests and dosage analysis. Pharmacy records showing unauthorized prescription pickups under false pretenses. Financial records proving motive through Nathan's $2 to $1,000 debt burden. Security footage documenting your conversations and criminal planning. I placed a thick manila folder on the table next to our Thanksgiving centerpiece, a symbol of gratitude turned into evidence of betrayal. I've also filed formal charges with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office for elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. Detective Patricia Martinez from the Elder Abuse Unit issued arrest warrants this morning. Nathan found his voice first. Attorney training overriding panic. Ray, you're making serious accusations based on conversations taken out of context. Elderly people experience medication confusion. Family members help with medical management. Nothing you've described constitutes criminal activity. Actually, Nathan, everything I've described constitutes felony-level criminal activity. I opened the folder and pulled out specific documents. Dr. Williams' medical report confirms Grace's blood test showed insulin levels 3 times normal therapeutic ranges, consistent with systematic overdosing over approximately 4 weeks. I placed the medical report where everyone could see Dr. Williams' official letterhead and conclusions. Eastside Pharmacy confirmed unauthorized prescription access on 4 separate occasions. Someone claiming family member status picked up insulin supplies Grace hadn't requested and didn't need. Nathan tried to interrupt, but I continued. Oregon State Bar records show 3 formal complaints against your practice for missing client funds. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, Mr. George Hendricks, Mrs. Agnes Murphy, all elderly, all showing cognitive impairment, all missing significant amounts of money from accounts you managed. But Daddy, Vicky started, her voice cracking. Don't call me that anymore. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but they reflected the emotional reality of our destroyed relationship. Not after you tried to murder your mother, not after you planned to steal everything we've worked 45 years to build, not after you discussed making Grace's death look accidental for insurance money. Grace was crying now, finally processing the full scope of their betrayal. Not just financial theft, not just medical abuse. They had been planning her death while she thanked them for their loving care. Ray, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding, Nathan said, switching to damage control mode. Family financial planning can involve complicated legal structures. Sometimes conversations sound different when taken out of context. We can resolve this as reasonable adults without involving law enforcement. No misunderstanding, no resolution, no reasonable adults. I stood up from the table where we'd shared Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations and anniversary dinners. You systematically poisoned my wife. You forged legal documents. You planned to murder her for insurance money. Those aren't family planning conversations. They're criminal conspiracies. Grace spoke for the first time since hearing the recording, her voice barely audible but carrying absolute finality. I want you to leave our house, both of you, right now, and never come back. Vicky broke down completely, 41 years of suppressed guilt overwhelming her ability to maintain any pretense. Daddy, please listen. We were desperate. Nathan said debt collectors were threatening physical violence. We just needed temporary access to house equity. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone permanently. You gave me insulin overdoses that could have killed me, Grace said with quiet horror. You watched me become confused and weak and scared. And you pretended to be concerned while you caused every symptom. Mom, I never wanted to hurt you. Nathan said the insulin doses were just enough to create temporary confusion, not enough to cause real harm. I thought we were just borrowing against the house value until we could get back on our feet. The recorded conversation mentions accidental death for insurance purposes, I replied. That wasn't borrowing, that was planning murder. Nathan made one final attempt at manipulation, appealing to whatever paternal instincts might override my commitment to justice. Ray, if you pursue criminal charges, it will destroy Vicky's life permanently. She'll go to prison for years. She'll lose her nursing license forever. Is that really what you want for the daughter you raised? I want the daughter I raised to face the consequences of attempting to murder her mother for money. The daughter I raised would never have considered such a thing. You're strangers who happen to share our DNA. Grace added quietly. I want to feel safe in my own home again. I want to take my medication without wondering if someone's trying to poison me. I want to sleep without worrying that my own daughter is planning to kill me. The next several hours became a blur of official procedures I'd witnessed from the investigator's side but never experienced as victims. Police interviews where I provided comprehensive evidence packages. Documentation procedures where every recording was verified and cataloged. Restraining orders prohibiting Vicky and Nathan from approaching within 500 feet of our property or persons. Detective Martinez, a 15-year veteran of the Elder Abuse Unit, reviewed our evidence with the thoroughness it deserved. Mr. Patterson, this is one of the most well-documented elder abuse cases I've ever seen. Your investigation was textbook perfect. These charges will stick in court. What about Grace's safety if they make bail? The restraining orders are ironclad. Any contact attempts result in immediate arrest. Nathan's already been classified as a flight risk because of his debt situation. Vicky will probably make bail, but she'll be monitored closely. That night, Grace and I stayed at Helen's house, sleeping in her guest room, while our own home became a crime scene requiring professional documentation. Grace couldn't stop shaking, not from medication effects this time, but from the emotional trauma of realizing her daughter had tried to kill her. Grace spent that night at her sister Helen's house, physically safe but emotionally devastated. The woman who'd trusted everyone, who'd raised Vicky to believe in family loyalty and unconditional love, couldn't understand how her own daughter had systematically planned her murder. Ray, she said as we sat in Helen's guest bedroom surrounded by the quiet safety of a home where nobody wanted to harm us. Did I fail somehow as a mother? How did we raise a child capable of this? That question would haunt both of us for months to come. In insurance fraud cases, you're dealing with strangers who've decided to cheat the system for personal gain. This was our daughter, raised with every advantage we could provide, who decided to commit matricide rather than address her financial problems through legitimate means. Nathan was arrested the following Monday and held on $25,000 bail. The evidence against him was overwhelming: recorded conversations establishing intent, documented history of elder abuse with previous clients, financial records proving motive. His attorney immediately started negotiating plea bargains, recognizing that a trial would result in decades of prison time. Vicky was also arrested but released pending trial, largely because of her cooperation and genuine emotional breakdown. The restraining order meant she couldn't return to our house or contact Grace directly, but she wasn't considered a flight risk given her complete collapse when confronted with evidence. For 3 months, Grace and I lived with the daily reality of what our family had become. Our house felt empty despite being full of furniture and memories. Holiday traditions felt meaningless when the people we'd shared them with had tried to murder us. Every medication schedule became a reminder of how trust had been weaponized against the people who'd given it freely. The worst part wasn't the attempted theft, or even the systematic poisoning. The worst part was Grace's constant self-doubt. She kept wondering if she'd somehow failed as a mother, if there were warning signs she'd missed, if loving unconditionally had somehow enabled the betrayal that nearly killed her. December brought a series of medical evaluations to document the full extent of damage from weeks of insulin manipulation. Grace's cognitive function had been significantly impaired, her blood sugar regulation remained unstable, and her trust in basic daily activities like medication management had been fundamentally shattered. She's physically recovering, Dr. Williams explained during one of our follow-up appointments, but the psychological impact will take much longer to heal. Grace doesn't trust her own judgment anymore. She questions every decision, second-guesses every symptom, worries that she's losing her mind when she's actually completely rational. That psychological damage was perhaps the cruelest aspect of their crime. Vicky and Nathan hadn't just tried to steal our money. They'd stolen Grace's confidence in her own mind, her ability to trust her perceptions, her belief that the people who claimed to love her actually wanted to protect rather than exploit her. January brought the letter that changed everything we thought we knew about redemption and justice. 12 pages of handwritten apology from Vicky, written during her 60-day stay in county jail while awaiting trial. Not the strategic kind of apology defense attorneys coach their clients to write for sentencing consideration, the raw, desperate kind of confession that comes from someone who's finally seen the full scope of what they've done and can no longer live with the weight of it. She explained how Nathan had convinced her that Grace and I were hoarding money while they faced financial ruin, how he'd presented the initial insulin tampering as temporary confusion that would resolve once they secured short-term financial relief, how he'd gradually escalated each step of their plan while making her believe she was just borrowing against her inheritance rather than committing attempted murder. But the letter also included something I hadn't expected from our daughter: complete, unqualified accountability. "I know I can't undo what I did to Mom," she wrote in handwriting I'd seen on childhood homework assignments and birthday cards. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix the fact that I tried to hurt the person who gave me life. I know you both have every right to never speak to me again, to pretend you never had a daughter, to let me disappear into prison and forget I ever existed. But if there's any chance, any possibility, however small, that I could someday earn back even a tiny piece of your trust, I'll do whatever it takes for however long it takes, not because I think I deserve forgiveness, but because I need to become someone worthy of the parents who raised me to be better than what I became." Grace read that letter 17 times over 2 weeks before she spoke to me about it. "Ray," she said finally, "I need to know if our daughter is truly sorry for what she did, or if she's just sorry she got caught and facing consequences." That distinction would determine everything that came next. The difference between genuine remorse and calculated damage control. Between someone who understood the gravity of their actions and someone who was simply trying to minimize punishment. The answer came during Vicky's sentencing hearing 6 months later. She stood before Judge Morrison, the same judge who'd helped me plan the investigation that exposed her crimes, and delivered a statement that surprised everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor, I don't want to reduce sentence based on cooperation or first-time offender status. I don't want sympathy because I was influenced by my husband's manipulation. I want to take full responsibility for every aspect of what I did." Her voice was steadier than it had been since this nightmare started. "I systematically poisoned my mother. I forged legal documents to steal my parents' home. I planned to make my mother's death look accidental so I could collect insurance money. Those are the facts, and I deserve whatever punishment the law requires for attempted murder." Nathan, by contrast, continued blaming everyone except himself, right up until sentencing. His debt situation, his failed business ventures, Vicky's emotional manipulation of his judgment, even my vindictive prosecution of what he claimed was a misunderstood family financial dispute. The difference between genuine remorse and calculated self-preservation was impossible to miss. Judge Morrison sentenced Nathan to 5 years in state prison plus $156,000 in restitution to cover our medical expenses and legal costs. For Vicky, considering her complete confession and obvious psychological breakdown, 18 months in prison plus 5 years probation and mandatory counseling. The sentencing disparity reflected both her cooperation and her genuine acceptance of responsibility. But more importantly, Judge Morrison's ruling gave Grace and me time to decide what forgiveness might look like if we ever chose to offer it. The answer came in 3 non-negotiable conditions I established for any future relationship with Vicky. requirements that would have to be met completely before she could be considered part of our family again in any capacity. First, complete financial transparency for 5 years minimum, monthly reports of all income, expenses, debts, and major purchases. No financial decisions involving amounts over $500 without prior discussion and approval. Any gambling, excessive spending, or new debt accumulation would immediately and permanently terminate all contact. Second, mandatory counseling and psychological evaluation, continuing well beyond legal requirements. Not just for probation compliance, but ongoing therapy to address whatever thought processes had made murdering her mother seem like a reasonable solution to financial stress. Third, supervised contact only, never alone with Grace, never overnight visits, never in situations where she'd have access to medications, financial documents, or legal paperwork without neutral supervision. Vicky agreed to all 3 conditions in writing, notarized and filed with the court as part of her probation requirements. More importantly, she agreed with the understanding that meeting these conditions didn't guarantee forgiveness, only the possibility of earning it through consistent actions over time. The first supervised visit happened 8 months after her release from prison. Grace and I met Vicky at a coffee shop near the courthouse, with Helen acting as our neutral supervisor and witness. It was awkward, painful, full of silences that stretched longer than conversation, but it was also the beginning of something that might eventually become trust again, built from the ground up through actions rather than words. "I dream about it sometimes," Vicky said during that first meeting, looking directly at Grace with an honesty I hadn't seen from her in years. "About what I did to you, about how close I came to actually killing you, about standing in our kitchen discussing your death like it was a business transaction." Grace reached across the table and touched Vicky's hand for just a moment. Not forgiveness, we weren't ready for that yet, but acknowledgement that rebuilding might be possible if Vicky proved capable of genuine change over time. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Vicky continued. "I don't even know if I want you to, because what I did shouldn't be forgiven easily. But I need you to know that I understand what I took from you, your sense of safety in your own home, your ability to trust people who claim to love you, your belief that family means protection instead of exploitation." Those words marked the beginning of a process that continues today, 2 full years after that devastating Thanksgiving confrontation. Vicky completed her 18-month prison sentence and exceeded all court-mandated counseling requirements. She now works at Salem Medical Center as a staff nurse, having maintained her professional license through a rigorous rehabilitation program that included ethics training, financial management courses, and ongoing psychological evaluation. Her employment requires monthly reports to both her probation officer and our family attorney, ensuring complete compliance with all transparency requirements. Every month, without fail, she sends detailed financial statements showing her modest $52,000 annual income, carefully managed living expenses of $2,800 per month, and steady progress reducing the massive debt burden that triggered this nightmare. She's reduced Nathan's $201,000 legacy to $134,000 through consistent payments, overtime work, and by selling their former house to eliminate mortgage obligations entirely. More importantly, she continues therapy with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a specialist in family trauma and financial crime psychology, not just for legal compliance, but for genuine understanding of the thought processes that made poisoning her mother seem like a reasonable response to financial pressure. "I understand now that I didn't just try to steal your money," Vicky said during our most recent supervised meeting at the courthouse coffee shop, where we meet monthly. "I tried to steal your sense of safety, your ability to trust the people closest to you, your belief that family means protection instead of exploitation. I damaged something that can't be fixed with apologies." Grace reached across the small table and held Vicky's hand for nearly 2 full minutes, the longest physical contact they'd shared since the arrests. Not forgiveness yet, but acknowledgement that genuine change might be occurring given enough time and consistent evidence. "I still have nightmares," Grace replied quietly, "about taking my medication and wondering if someone's trying to hurt me. about trusting people who say they love me, about feeling safe in my own home with my own family. I know. And I know that saying sorry a million times doesn't undo that damage. But I need you to understand that I see clearly now what I took from you. Not just money or property, but your peace of mind, your ability to feel secure with the people who should protect you most in the world. These monthly meetings have become our barometer for measuring authentic change versus performed remorse. Helen continues serving as our neutral supervisor, ensuring conversations remain constructive while documenting progress for both legal and personal evaluation purposes. Nathan chose an entirely different path. He filed for divorce while serving his 5-year sentence and has maintained zero contact with any of us since his release 11 months ago. His attorney delivered a brief message. Nathan wanted no further involvement with the Patterson family situation. Some people respond to consequences by accepting responsibility and working toward redemption. Others respond by disappearing entirely, choosing isolation over accountability. Grace's physical health recovered completely once the systematic insulin manipulation stopped, but psychological healing required extensive professional intervention. She spent 8 months working with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a therapist specializing in elder abuse recovery, learning to rebuild confidence in her own judgment and medication management abilities. The hardest part wasn't the confusion episodes or even the fear of dying, Grace explained during one therapy session I was permitted to attend. The hardest part was doubting my own mind, wondering if I was losing my memory, becoming incompetent, couldn't be trusted with basic decisions about my own health and safety. That's the most insidious aspect of systematic gaslighting, Dr. Walsh replied. When someone deliberately creates symptoms and then offers to help manage those symptoms, victims often lose confidence in their ability to distinguish reality from manipulation. Your confusion wasn't medical decline, it was criminal assault disguised as loving care. Dr. Walsh helped Grace understand that recovering from elder abuse isn't just about physical healing. It's about rebuilding fundamental trust in your own perceptions, your own judgment, your own right to make decisions about your life without second-guessing every choice. We've implemented comprehensive safeguards that provide both security and peace of mind. Our updated legal protections include wills that require verification from 2 independent attorneys before any modifications can be executed. Medical directives demanding confirmation from Grace's primary physician, plus a geriatric specialist before any major treatment decisions. Power of attorney documents with built-in fraud protections, requiring notarized witness statements, and judicial oversight for any significant financial transactions. Most importantly, we have established what Dr. Walsh calls trust verification protocols, systematic ways to confirm information and test reliability when family members or others offer assistance with important matters. Trust but verify has become our household philosophy, a reminder that healthy relationships include both emotional connection and practical accountability measures. The house we almost lost remains our home, now secured with enhanced legal protections and updated security systems. We've consciously created new traditions that don't carry painful associations with betrayal and manipulation. Thanksgiving is now celebrated with Helen's extended family, Christmas with our neighbors, the Sullivans who've become chosen family, Grace's birthday with friends from her book club who've proven more trustworthy than blood relatives. This year's Thanksgiving will mark exactly 2 full years since the confrontation that ended our old family structure and began building something more honest and sustainable. We'll sit down to dinner with just each other, plus Helen and her daughter Marie, who've become the family we can trust without reservation or verification protocols. People who've earned their place at our table through years of consistent, caring behavior rather than demanding it through biological connection. Vicky will not be invited this year, but she might be next year if she continues meeting every single condition we've established without deviation. If her financial reports continue showing responsible management and debt reduction, if her therapy sessions continue producing genuine insights rather than strategically calculated responses, if her actions continue demonstrating real understanding of boundaries and accountability rather than mere compliance. The empty chair at our table isn't punishment, it's consequence paired with opportunity. A reminder that family relationships require continuously earned trust, not assumed loyalty based on shared genetics. That love without accountability becomes enabling. That forgiveness without evidence of fundamental change becomes permission for continued harm. Grace occasionally asks whether we should lower our standards, whether family should mean unlimited chances regardless of past crimes, whether holding Vicky to strict conditions indefinitely might prevent genuine reconciliation from ever occurring. My answer remains unwavering. We've given Vicky something far more valuable than immediate forgiveness or unconditional acceptance. We've given her the opportunity to prove through sustained actions over years that she's become someone worthy of trust. That opportunity means absolutely nothing if it comes without significant cost or sustained effort. The real test isn't whether she can express appropriate remorse or say the words we want to hear. The real test is whether she can demonstrate through consistent behavior over multiple years that she truly understands the difference between genuine love and manipulative exploitation, between family relationships built on mutual respect and family relationships built on assumed entitlement to forgiveness. 24 months of evidence suggests she's taking that test seriously, not because legal requirements force compliance, but because she appears to finally comprehend the magnitude of what she destroyed and the enormity of what she's attempting to rebuild from the ground up. Trust must be earned back one careful day at a time, through actions that consistently demonstrate permanent change rather than temporary improvement motivated by consequences. But at least now, we understand the crucial difference between family that protects your vulnerabilities and family that systematically exploits them, between relationships built on mutual respect and relationships built on assumption that blood connection excuses criminal behavior. We've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love involves refusing to enable destructive patterns until people prove through years of changed behavior that they've fundamentally altered their approach to responsibility, accountability, and respect for boundaries. That's a lesson worth learning, even if it required 68 years and nearly losing everything we'd built together to understand it completely. The monster who once wore my blood is working every single day to earn the right to call herself my daughter again. Whether she ultimately succeeds depends entirely on choices she makes consistently going forward, not on biological connection or emotional manipulation. And that's exactly how it should work, because that's how trust functions in genuinely healthy families. It's earned through consistent actions over time, not demanded through genetic relationship or emotional blackmail. The story isn't finished yet, but for the first time since this nightmare began, it feels like it might have the possibility of a genuine resolution rather than just an interrupted tragedy waiting to resume.